This is the Jabba the Hutt and Salacious Crumb set that Hasbro recently released in honor of the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. And so I wanted to go ahead and take a look at it. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to first, I think, talk about what came before it, because this is not a new set in reality. It is a re-release of some things that Hasbro had released in the past, about 8 or 9 years ago. So before we open this up, why don't we go ahead and take a trip down memory lane and look at the other versions of this figure that have been released in the past. So this is the figure that was originally released in 2014. This is the 6-inch scale Black Series Jabba the Hutt, and at the time it was a little bit controversial because it cost about $40 and came with nothing. There's no accessories or anything. In fact, there's a giant hole in the back here with nothing in it, which I've always thought is rather strange. They didn't even add anything, some cardboard decoration or anything like that. But if we look at the figure outside of the box, you can see that it's actually a very attractive figure, so as far as Jabbas go, especially compared to some of the ones that we've gotten in the past. I think the sculpting is a lot more accurate and detailed, and we've got nice paintwork with orange tones instead of the more beigey tones that we often got with Jabbas in the past. And one thing it also has is an action feature, what I would consider the best kind of action feature, and that is one you can totally ignore if you don't want to have it there. But if you turn his arm here like this, you can see that it makes his mouth open and close, and you can also do it manually like that. The reason you can ignore it is that they've used this kind of rubbery coating all over his head. He's got kind of a rubbery skin that you can feel covering all of the mechanism in here, so you can't actually see the hinge or the seams where the mouth moves. And so that's actually a pretty cool feature, I think. And so far, anyway, over the last 9 years, this has not started to get sticky or crack or anything like that. I haven't had any problems with it deteriorating, which is always nice. My only real complaints about this figure, I suppose, aside from the fact that it was a little expensive when it came out and didn't come with any kind of accessories, is that they made his tail kind of overly stubby, and they didn't include his tail scar. But other than that, I think this is a great figure. In fact, they later used this figure as the basis for a 1/12 scale Jabba that they've included in other sets. This one, of course, doesn't have the action feature, but it's otherwise the same basic sculpt. They did, on this one, though, add his tail scar, you'll notice. And also, they made his tail a little bit less stubby, I think. A little hard to tell because of the difference in scale, but I think this is also a very good Jabba. One thing that did make it a little bit more complicated at the time, though, was that when they released that larger 6-inch scale Jabba, they also, fairly shortly afterward, released an SDCC exclusive, San Diego Comic-Con exclusive version, which is what you see right here. And this one actually did come with some accessories. So it also came with a nice box here. You can see this nice Black Series box, and it opens up here with some Velcro. And if you open up that and raise it, you can see that you reveal the whole throne room display here. And it's actually, despite being made of cardboard, it's very attractive, I think. You've even got here on the bottom a little pattern for the Rancor pit. And up top you have Star Wars The Black Series. Just an attractive box. And it's a little bit of a shame almost to take it out of there. It's difficult to remove everything without causing some damage to the cardboard display part. They even included a cardboard Hanan Carbonite back there, which you can swap out for the actual Black Series figure if you so desire. Anyway, this one was released, as I say, as a convention exclusive, and they charged, I believe, $65 at the convention, but because most people can't actually go to San Diego Comic-Con, they ended up having to buy them on eBay for much inflated prices, sometimes as much as $200, which was kind of insane. I managed to get mine a lot cheaper than that, but still I had to pay a markup. But, you know, a lot of people probably thought it was worth it because this is the only way to get Jabba's hookah and throne railing in this 6-inch scale, and also Salacious Crumb in the 6-inch scale. But at the same time, I think it was kind of too expensive for a lot of people, or maybe they just didn't enter the hobby until after it was released. Remember, this is about 9 years ago. So there, I think, is a sizable population of people who wanted a 6-inch scale Jabba display, if possible. So I'm not surprised that Hasbro decided to re-release this set. But I do wonder how it compares to the new set that they just released. So let's go ahead and open that new one up and see what it actually looks like. So here we are back at the box I showed you at the beginning, the new version of this set. You can see that it's definitely inspired by the vintage packaging, especially for the vintage Jabba the Hutt playset, which I'll show you right here. You can see it's very similar, which I wholeheartedly approve of. The only thing that's a little bit too bad is that you have all these, you know, warnings and additional text here for different countries. Kind of makes the design a little unnecessarily busy. If we look at the top, you can see there are some pictures of the various sort of features, I guess you'd say. And on the side, you've got Jabba in close-up. On the other side, we have Jabba and his railing and Salacious Crumb, the whole set, essentially. And on the back, it's exactly the same as the front, except the warning here is in French, so I assume that's for, you know, the Canadian audience. One thing you may have noticed, of course, about this is that it's one of the newer style boxes that doesn't have any kind of window in it. I'm an open collector, generally speaking, so it doesn't really bother me. And of course, the original vintage Jabba box didn't have any kind of a cellophane window in it either, so I'm not overly bothered by that. Let's go ahead and open this up and see what the actual insides look like. All right, so inside, as expected, we've got some cardboard kind of keeping everything in place. And if we pull that out, you can see, wow, Jabba is wrapped in some, looks like tissue paper, which is actually kind of an interesting look. So he's also got some of these new paper style twisty tie alternatives, I guess. You know, I don't really mind this kind of packaging, at least for this kind of figure. The smaller figures, when you can't see the paint job and compare them, it's a bit of a problem. But for this kind of play set, I think it's fine. So let's go ahead and get all these pieces out of here and see what they look like. All right, here we have the masked hut. I have no idea who could possibly be in here. We'll have to see who it is. All right, here we have Jabba. Oops, there we go. And we'll do a detailed comparison with this version and the older one in a moment. But let's go ahead and open up the rest of the parts of the set here. We've got the hookah railing, which comes in 2 pieces. That's the same as the previous version. Boy, this feels really light, I'll have to say. Maybe lighter than the previous one. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have the previous version just on its own because I repainted it and kind of attached it to my custom throne a while back. And so I can't really make a direct comparison, but yeah, feels a little on the flimsy side. And finally, we have here the hookah pipe and the hookah pipe, the hookah and the pipe, I guess I should say. Now, there's one thing missing here. Where is my Salacious Crumb? What? Oh. I left him in the package. He's over here in the back. There we are. This little tiny box, I'm assuming, contains 1 Salacious Crumb. So let's go and open it up. There we go. What is this? Whoop, wait a minute. Yep. Oh, that is him. He actually gets much more compact than I would have expected. All right. So let us go ahead and set this up a little bit more nicely so we can have it on display, and then I'll compare some of the previous parts to this version. So here we have the new version all set up nicely, and generally speaking, I would say it looks very similar to the previous one, as we'll see when I do a little comparison in a second. But there are a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, well, he's got the same action feature, of course, where you turn his arm and his mouth opens. You can do it manually as well. But if you look at the position of his tongue, and I may need to get a little closer to actually show you this, you can see that the tongue, when his mouth is kind of in the resting state, is up against the roof of his mouth. And if you open the mouth, it's kind of right in the middle of his mouth. So, like that. Now, if we look at the previous version of this figure, right here, you can see that the tongue is at the bottom of the mouth when it's at the resting state, and, you know, continues to be there when you open it up. So it's quite a bit of a different look, I think. Personally, I think this original version looks better. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the picture on the box, you can see that it looks like the original version with the tongue down more. But I did check a couple of unboxings of people online for this figure, and it looks like they have this kind of tongue on theirs as well, so that may be one way you can easily tell these apart. If we look at the figures side by side here, this is the original one from about 9 years ago, and this is the new one. I think you can tell that the original one had a bit of a lighter paint job. It's not a huge difference, but just generally, overall, you can see that this seems a bit darker. On Jabba's body, it looks like they did more dry brushing of a lighter color, whereas they didn't really do that so much over here. And also the color of the orange on his body seems darker over here. It's not really a better or worse kind of thing. I'm not really sure I have a strong preference about it, but it's something to keep in mind. Aside from that, these appear to be more or less identical. Now, if we look on the bottom, we have, you know, various kinds of copyright information there. There's no actual year or anything, though. That's what I was kind of looking for. But there is another difference here. Is if you compare the bottoms, you can see that this does here have different information, and also it is sort of embossed or debossed into the actual figure itself, whereas this is just a flat area that they have printed in black. I mean, this is easier to read over here, but it's interesting that they got rid of all of this, which would have been part of the actual model for the figure. Now, I think things get a little bit more interesting when we look at Salacious Crumb, because I notice a number of differences between these two figures here. The sort of trend of the new version, which is on the left, being darker in terms of the paint, seems to carry through here. It's a bit darker. But that's not all. If we look at the faces, you can see that they've painted the new version on the left as if his little beaky mouth kind of thing here was a big bear nose or something like that. It looks a little strange, doesn't it? Whereas on here, and this is the kind that, or the paint job that is pictured on the box, and so is presumably accurate, you can see it's just the tip of his little beak that is black. But beyond that, one thing I wasn't really expecting is that they appear to be different sizes as well. This new version appears to be slightly smaller. I don't know if you can tell, but if we, for example, put their heads like this, you can see that the ears are much larger on the old version on the right, and also I think the head itself is bigger on the one on the right, and just generally it does seem to be bigger. I will say that the original one always seemed maybe a little bit too big, So they may have been trying to correct for that, and if so, that's, I think, not a big deal, but it is definitely something to keep in mind when you're thinking about these two versions. Other than that, I think, well, actually, I take it back. This is not the same figure in other ways, too, because if you look, this figure has articulation in the knees, okay? Whereas this one does not. He has articulation at the hips, which this one does as well, but no knee articulation, which is very interesting, isn't it? Aside from that, I don't notice any major differences. But still, when I was just expecting this to be the same exact figure reissued, but there seemed to be quite a few differences between them. As I mentioned, I don't have a version of this now that's out of the package and unchanged, but we can kind of get an idea what they look like together here. And I think, honestly, any differences are going to be fairly minor on this. It does seem like it's a bit of a different color gold, but not really anything to get upset about. Otherwise, pretty much identical. So, in conclusion, this new version of the set is more or less the same as the previous one, with some unexpected differences. I did not really expect Salacious Crumb to be as different as he is, and if it wasn't for his slightly strange face paint, where they made his nose seem too big, I would say this is probably the better version, because he did seem a little bit too big before. Right now, I don't know, it's a little bit of a toss-up. Jabba himself, again, not a huge difference, but they do have this tongue issue, which I honestly prefer the previous version, but it's not a deal-breaker by any means. If you were to try and buy the original set from SDCC on eBay or something like that, it's going to cost you at least double what this one costs. This is an $89.99 set. You can get it on HasbroPulse.com or on ShopDisney.com, at least as of the moment. That's where I got mine. As a matter of fact, my Hasbro Pulse order seemed like it was going to be taking longer, and Disney showed that they had it in stock, so I canceled the Pulse order and ordered this one, actually for less shipping too, and got it pretty much right away. So you can certainly, I think, get your hands on these relatively easily compared to the SDCC version, which is definitely a plus. Well, that's about all I have to say about this, but I am very glad to see that they have some new, quote-unquote, new Jabba figures in the stores now, or at least online stores. And if you missed it the first time, I would say go ahead and get this one. You're not going to be too disappointed with it for sure. This video was brought to you with the help of my Patreon supporters, including these Palace VIPs you see on your screen right now, Angelica Brady and Jesper Murtu. If you'd like to see how you could support the channel for as little as $1 a month, you can check out the link in the video description.